So just about a month ago, I took a look at this machine during a live build and test print that you saw right here on this channel. If you missed that, or if you want to go back and review, take a look up here and in the description, and of course I will have those links for you so that you can go back, watch the whole thing, catch the highlights, whatever you'd like to do. Now it's been a month and this is a Kickstarter machine, and that Kickstarter is about up, and it's taken me a lot of time along with all the other things I do on this channel to get this review to you. So this is going to be a quick one. I have a lot of notes up here on my screen that I'm going to try to get through, because at the time that I publish this, there's probably only a dozen or so hours left in this Kickstarter, and last I checked, they're really close, borderline to their goal. So in this video, I'm going to be going through this machine, give you all of my thoughts, give you all the specs, of course, and I'm going to be comparing it to its little big brother here, and telling you what I think. Is it a worthy successor to this little guy, which I really liked before? So that's what I'm going to be doing right here on Kersey Fabrications. Let's go. So as I mentioned, I've been working for over a week on this machine to get it ready for this video, and now I'm out of time, so I'm going to have to quickly go through all this information and hopefully get this video edited. And obviously if you're watching it now, I did do that, so I hope you enjoy what I put together here for you. But let's go through the specs and what I was able to find out about this machine on the product information page. So first of all, the build plate of this machine is 300 by 350 by 350, and that is 300 deep, 350 wide, and 350 tall. It does have an auto bed leveling system. It has maybe a magnetic bed, so mine didn't come with it, but I did see on their website where by the time it's shipping, there may be a magnetic bed option that comes on this machine. I found that the bed that it comes with stuck extremely well, in fact to the point of being very difficult to get the prints off. It is a 4-head machine, and I keep calling it a machine because it's not just a printer. It actually is a multi-function machine, and this machine does single color FDM, dual color FDM, laser, and CNC all in one machine. And as you can see back here, I've got all of the various tool heads, and it's a very easy swappable system that they've got built into this machine. Now, talking about the 3D printing portion of this machine, it only supports PLA. They mentioned that expressly on the website. The max nozzle temperature they recommend is 220°C. Max bed temp, one place I saw 80°C, the other place I saw 100°C. Obviously, if you're printing with PLA, 80°C is going to be more than enough. You'll never get to 100°C or have any reason to that I can think of. Another thing that was kind of interesting to me, and something that I was able to verify a bit in my own testing, is that they are saying that the printing speed should only go up to about 40 millimeters per second. And I'll get into that in just a minute when I get into the electronics, but that has to do with the electronics of the machine, in my opinion. If you go too much over 40 millimeters per second, you do start getting less impressive prints off of this. Talking about the laser, it is a 1500 milliwatt laser. It's a class 4 laser. That means that it's a fairly weak laser, and it's only meant for engraving. It will do wood, leather, cardboard, plastic, etc. Again, just a light duty laser. Again, you'll see here my laser pieces are just on the cardboard that they provided. Now, that being said, if you go back, if you watch my original review of the toy DIY, which again I will link in the description and hopefully put a link to the first of the 2-part review that I did up here so that you can take a look. That will allow you to do wood laser engraving that looks really good. I had no problems with it in my original review. Again, I'll get more into that in a minute. The CNC portion, expressly for non-metal purposes, it's a fairly fast spindle. It'll get up to 14,500 RPMs unloaded, but it's not a particularly strong motor. You're not going to be able to do metal engraving. It's designed mainly for wood, plastic, foam, and acrylic. And again, as you'll see up here, I've got some acrylic that it had no problem with. I have some foam it had no problem with. Again, we'll get into those in just a second. So let me go ahead and we're going to jump quickly into the hardware of this printer, and I will give you my thoughts about how it all went together. So as I mentioned, if you want to see a full build of this machine, it was all done live on this channel, and you can go take a look at that stream for the details. I wanted to just give you my overall thoughts, though, of the machine since you're watching this video, and that is this thing is built like a tank. It is definitely built as a machine that they knew would not only be doing 3D printing duties, but would also be doing CNC jobs as well. And so everything from all of the L brackets, everything from the way that they've mounted the Z gantry, these are really, really thick. It is heavy duty. You're not moving this around a whole lot. In fact, I think you'll be moving the table a lot sooner than you're actually going to be moving the machine and there being anything related to the rigidity of the machine as being a problem. It's one of the real highlights of this machine is how well it's built. Just in general, it's an excellent frame. It's an excellent system they've got here. And overall, that's definitely a high point of this whole machine. The build process, from my standpoint, very straightforward. I had no problems getting this assembled, and so that's about it for the actual hardware. Let's move on to the electronics. So looking at the electronics here, this is an eCube Maker branded board that they've developed. It is running on an 8-bit microprocessor, an ATmega 2560, pretty mumuch standard for the industry just a few years ago. It is most likely running on an A4988 driver or a DRV8825, which is my guess for which driver it's actually running, looking at some of the artifacts that I saw on the prints. And it is definitely not silent steppers. This is a really loud machine in terms of the motion in 3D printing. Now, obviously, if you're doing lasering, if you're doing CNC, well, laser, it's not moving fast enough to really care too much about the noise. CNC, the CNC operation's much, much louder, so the only place we really care about that a whole lot is in the 3D printing process, and there it's pretty loud, but I think the bigger problem here is it's old technology. In fact, I did a little bit of digging. I pulled apart, I keep pointing at this machine again down here, and I pulled that apart. I'm pretty sure they used the exact same electronics that were in that original printer and just put them in the bigger case with the bigger dimensions, tweaked the firmware a little bit, and was off with the new machine. So it's going to do as well as the original machine, but since you have a lot of room here that you're going to be moving around on, particularly with the 3D printing duties, I don't really think it's a very good choice for the 3D printing duties. Now, with that being said, it's fine for CNC, it's fine for laser, you're not moving fast, you're not moving much, so I think it's going to be fine for those operations. In fact, that's really the strength here. The power supply in here is not a brand I recognized. It's a Huntkey, which I had not heard of before. Pretty sure, if I remember correctly, it's a 350 watt power supply. They have 10 connectors, which is pretty standard from what we're seeing. They didn't use any ferrules, so unfortunately, they probably should do that before they ship because they, as we know, they shouldn't be tinning those connectors. And one thing I found really odd, and I'm hoping that this is a pre-production thing, is they didn't crimp the power supply connectors. So if you look at my live stream, you'll see that there. They didn't actually put proper connectors on the power supply. They just took it, tinned the end of the wire, cranked it down on the power supply. So definitely not what I would expect from a production unit. Just saying it here because we're talking about electronics, I think the electronics in this machine is the weakest part, because not only that, but one thing I didn't mention was the display. The display is minimalist. Yeah, we'll just call it minimalist. I was going to say minimalist at best, but it's minimalist. It will walk you through the changing of the print heads, which it does a great job. It will walk you through the steps of each of the process. So if you're doing a CNC, it says do this, do this, do this. Works really well for that. Laser, the same thing. Do this, do this, do this. And you get a laser out of it. So it does a good job. When we did 3D printing, I had a little bit of problems, but I'm going to save that to the 3D printing section. So let's move on a little bit more to the 3D printing and talk a little bit more about the firmware. So let's talk about the firmware a bit, particularly in regards to the 3D printing. As I mentioned, as far as CNC and laser were concerned, I really don't have a problem with the firmware. It seems to do most things that it should, particularly as a beginner machine. As far as 3D printing is concerned, again, it's very minimalistic. It pretty much walks you through the points of inserting a card, starting a print, yada, yada, yada. It does the same thing for CNC and laser. The problems really came down to is the fact that it's so minimalistic. If you have a problem, it's very difficult to tweak. I have heard other people's not having any problems with the Z offset on this machine, but me personally, Z offset was really a nightmare. It took multiple 3D prints to get it working correctly for me. I had multiple directions that told me how to do it slightly differently. I tried multiple processes that should have got me a correct Z offset. None of them seemed to work. Ultimately, I ended up having to start a print, find out that the Z offset was off, decide how far I needed to adjust it, start another print. If that was still off, start another print, yada, yada, yada. Because they don't really want you to use the wheels for that, because since it does everything through auto bed leveling, if you adjust the wheels at all, that's not going to help with your next print. So that's really not a solution. So you need to get that Z offset right. And then when the auto leveling takes over, it seems to do just fine with it. And I didn't have any problems once I got it adjusted. But again, that process was pretty painful. I don't know why the auto Z offset didn't seem to work correctly. As I mentioned, the firmware was pretty much identical to the original Toy DIY. It really needs a proper display on it. What would have solved the entire problem with the Z offset issue would have been baby stepping. If they would have had baby stepping in here, I would have started it, it would have been off, I would have just done the baby stepping, and it would have been fine. It would have stored that setting, and I'd been done probably the first or second print instead of having to cycle through all of those different tests. So if they get baby stepping in here, that whole process will kind of be sorted out. So let's move on to the 3D prints themselves. So the first quick test print that I did on this machine was this vase mode print that you see right here. This was one that I did during the live stream. This print turned out great. Obviously, it was pre-sliced to not go too fast for the machine. I'm hoping this was about 40 millimeters per second. That's probably what it looked like. And it's really clean. I had no problems with it. And the bottom broke off of it, but that was my fault. I was in a hurry to get it off the plate because it was a live stream. But the raft looks really good. Everything looked really good on this print. No problems at all. So from there, though, I wanted to go ahead. I had limited time, so I wanted to do a larger print, really try to show off what this printer may be capable of, even if it did it slowly. And what I ended up with was this print here, and as you can see, it did not finish. Has a massive layer shift on here. I think the main reason that this print failed on me was that it didn't have proper cooling, or it didn't have enough cooling for this kind of print. Around the entire print, you'll notice that there are different overhangs that just could not print correctly. I think as it got to some of the places where this layer shift actually occurred, I think what happened is it eventually got hung up because something was popping up or something like that, and it hung it up, it shifted, and so I had to stop this print. As you can see on here, there's some definite parts where it probably just broke off because, again, without enough cooling, when you try to do pretty extreme overhangs, again, this is a print that should be able to be done without any supports, but it does take a printer that's dialed in well enough to do so. I will say that up until the point that it failed, the print quality was really good. The layer consistency is really nice. Overall, it's a good print. So if you are printing something like this, I do think that you're going to have to be very careful with your overhangs. May have to use a little bit more support than what you would think that you might have to do. And if you look at these print heads, what's going on here is that the print head only has one fan in it, and that fan is both used to cool the actual hot end and it's used to cool your part. They don't have two, independent fans. It's just all integrated together. I think that's one of the reasons that it's only designed for PLA as well is, again, you don't have a whole lot of cooling options if you were trying to do different materials. But there we go on this one. So after that, I went for this Davy Jones print, and this is by Fotis Mint. So this is a terrific print. I went with this one because, as you can see, not a lot of crazy overhangs, not a lot of problems where cooling could really be the issue. Now, I did push this one a little bit faster. I wanted to see what would happen if I pushed the print a little bit faster. So this one, I upped the print speed to 50 millimeters per second, and I upped the travel speed to 120 millimeters per second from the default. I think it was either at 70 or 80. And overall, I'm happy with this print. It's not fantastic. Again, I printed a little bit faster than they would have wanted me to, but it did finish. The overhangs do not look too bad. There are a couple of spots that, again, could have used supports because the cooling wasn't fantastic, but this is perfectly acceptable. It did finish. It does look pretty good, and overall, I can't complain too much about this print other than, you know, I probably should have printed it slower. So let's go on to the multicolor prints. Now for the multicolor prints, I did two different tests. Number one, of course, I printed the test print that comes on the SD card, and that's this little traffic cone. It's the same test print that came with the original toy DIY that I still have down here on the floor. And this printed just fine. I mean, you can't really tell that there's any problems with switching. Again, end up with kind of the same layer consistency as I see on this big guy over here. It's not the cleanest print you've ever seen, but depending on what you're doing with the machine, it'll be just fine for probably most mechanical prints, things like that. And if you're willing to put in a little sanding and elbow grease, it would be fine. Again, I digress. But this one turned out great. This is a terrific multicolor print. As you can see, for the first time peeling that off, the actual raft does a really good job. So no complaints at all on that print. The second print I did, you've seen on this channel before. This is the tree frog print. And typically this is about the hardest multicolor print that I can throw at it because there's not a whole lot of consistency from point to point. There is a lot of retractions. There is a lot of very close printing between each of the colors. And first of all, it did complete it. As you can see, I do have a full frog here, but it's not a very nice looking print. I really have a lot of stringing, as you can see here. And there's a lot of, it's not a complete frog, particularly in the yellow. I don't know what was going on. The other thing I noticed is that your purge tray is here. So if you're not familiar with the purge tray, what this printer particularly does, and the reason it's particularly good at multicolor printing in general, is it comes over here to do all of the purges. You end up with a big mess here on the counter, but all of your waste is here as it's switching between colors, and then it comes back to your print. On the small machine, the purge tray is relatively close to where your print is because it's a small bed. On this one, I was printing in the middle, and there's a pretty good distance between here, which I think is where we're getting all of this from, and possibly where some of this porousness of this frog is coming from, because what that means is that we're getting, I think, a little bit of oozing as we move from here to here. It's not tight, it's not crisp as it moves here, particularly since they have their travels relatively slow, so we're not getting back to the model fast enough. That's just my theory. I didn't have a lot of time to play with testing that. As you can see, I think there's still some potential here. The tree frog on this other printer was absolutely fantastic. It was just, it was the best color print that I've done to date, or multicolor print that I've done to date. This one has the potential there. Maybe it can be tweaked. Or the other thing I want to try is just move your multicolor prints, particularly if they're small, move them closer to the purge tray so they don't have as far to travel. So the last thing I want to mention about the 3D printing portion of this machine is the software that you need to use to actually generate G-code for this machine. They do provide their own software called eCubeware. It is based upon an old version of Cura, and I'm talking about Cura 3.2.1. It even says so on the About page. And that software leaves a lot to be desired. For one, as I saw on the other machine, that eCubeware is still extremely slow at slicing. If you got a big model, if you have a complicated model, if you put a lot of supports in it, it really can take a long time to slice. Like, go away, get a drink, make a sandwich, come back, and it might be done slicing kind of slow. And they have said that they are going to release profiles and the necessary instructions to actually use stock Cura. I'm really hoping they do that because the eCubeware that they have really needs updating. Number one, it doesn't have all the newest Cura features, all the newest Cura support, And like I said, it's slow and it's really going to hamper your entire process when you're trying to put that together. So I'm still waiting for more information on how you can use this with stock Cura. But it does work, it does slice, and obviously this, we're both sliced with their slicing software, so it does work, it does do the job. I'm just looking forward to some updates. Let's jump right into the laser portion of this machine. Real quick, I wanted to add here before I get into the laser section, safety first with the laser and with the CNC in particular. The laser, they do provide a set of goggles. You do not want to look directly at the laser, at what the laser is shining on. It is a powerful laser. It can damage your eyes, particularly at close range, yada yada. Just if you're running the laser, wear the goggles, make sure that small children don't come into the room, make sure that no one else comes into the room where you're operating the laser without having a pair of goggles on. Let people know the dangers. When you're doing that, when you're doing CNC, you're going to need some regular safety goggles, which it doesn't come with. But again, I totally want to recommend this before I go any further. Want to cover this. Make sure safety first. Laser, CNC, both potentially dangerous operations if you don't take good care. This is a tool. It needs to be treated with respect. So let's keep on going. So as I mentioned, laser engraving on this machine, just like its little brother, same software, same EQ Maker laser that they provided before. And again, kind of like their EQ Maker software, that laser software is really what falls down and fails what is a otherwise nice machine for laser engraving. So as I can show you here, I was able to get multiple laser engravings out of here. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, the EQ Maker laser, though, would not produce dithered engravings. And I don't know why it wouldn't. As you can see, I tried it at normal strength. I tried it twice as fast. No reason at all I could find that it wasn't working, but the dithering was just failing on that. As you can see, if you're going for the flat, like just mono, black, white engravings, it looks just beautiful. This is, again, this is their demo engraving with the laser, and it looks fantastic. Sharp, crisp. When you do these, don't touch them because you will possibly mess them up a bit, but this one came out fantastic. Then just to test the machine, to make sure that the machine could do it, I did take what was this Iron Man helmet that I was trying to engrave on these, and I took it into a third-party piece of software called Lightburn, and Lightburn produced excellent results. Now this could be a little bit darker. I could play with the settings just a little bit, but as you can see, it looks great. The dithering worked just as it's supposed to. I see the lines a little bit. I think that has to do with the fact it wasn't quite strong enough. I can probably even potentially do finer layer lines. I'm going to have to play with that a little bit, but much like with the other machine, as you can see on this side, no lines. And with the other machine, I had no problems with doing the laser etching, and so I was really happy with it. Again, it's not going to be cutting anything. You're not going to be lasering probably metal or wood, maybe some metal if the paint on it will pop off of it if you laser it. But it's mainly going to be for knickknacks like this, coasters, things like that. But it does a good job. Just keep in mind, you may need to buy some third-party software if the included EQ Maker laser software doesn't really do what you expected it to do. But something like the Lightburn, not a problem. It's not real expensive, and you can pick that up second. And the settings are a little bit funny, but if you take a look at the G-code that comes with the default one, you'll figure out how it works. And I was able to get it working without too much extra time. Time to move on to CNC. So much like the laser, I found the CNC operation of this machine very much like the original toy DIY. Again, same software, both on the PC and the firmware itself, same thing. So we'll just take a look at a couple of the things that I was able to produce. So first of all, it did come with a little piece of foam, which I totally recommend this as an excellent way to actually test out any of your CNC operations, because this is inexpensive and you're not ruining something you may only have one piece of. So you can get this foam, and I just ran their test CNC on here, and it did a really nice job of carving the EQ Maker logo directly on here. No complaints at all. Now, when it came to actually producing something that you could run the CNC on to carve into a piece of acrylic, again, I really didn't have too many problems. The CNC software, given the fact I wasn't doing any dithering or anything like that, it's going to work best if you have a vector-based drawing, whether that be a DXF or an SVG, because those give you the lines that are really clean. I did notice you can't import standard like PNGs or bitmaps or other raster-based image formats, and it will do its best to basically just try to carve a black and white version of it. It's not recommended, but it did look like it would try to do that. But anyway, got this version of an Iron Man image, and as you can see, this one actually did turn out really well. In fact, the only problem I have, you'll notice his head kind of fades away there, and that's because anytime you're doing a CNC operation on this machine, and they don't mention this anywhere in the instructions, but you're going to need to level this bed. And that involves taking a ruler to each of the corners, moving this whole thing around, and making sure that you've got all 4 of them level with your gantry, because if it's not level with your gantry, this only goes so deep into the material. And so if you're going, you know, just a little bit into the material, if you're not quite deep enough, you fade away as you get to that one that's further away, and that's what happened here. Other than that, the machine did its job. They just needed a little bit more clarification to make sure that your bed is level when you're going to do this, and instead of just assuming that that was correct. Now, it'd be really neat to see them take their auto leveling feature and actually figure out how the bed is off and then compensate for it in your CNC carving. I would have loved to have seen that, but as it is, works like a normal CNC machine. The bed moves, the head moves. It doesn't really move up and down any more than it needs to do for the dive cuts. It doesn't really do any compensation. But as I said, I'm really happy with its basic CNC operation. I'm really hoping, and I never was able to take a look at this on the original machine, I would love to know if you can do more complex CNC carving with this. Again, the motor's not going to give you a lot of torque, I don't believe, but maybe with the right bit, going slow enough, you may be able to do some more complex work on here. I would really like to figure it out, particularly since it has such a large bed. Really would open up a lot of different options. Let me see what I left out to this point, and let me give you a summary and a conclusion and what my final thoughts are on this machine. So just as I did at the beginning of the video, let me mention here that this is a Kickstarter campaign. This is a Kickstarter machine, and everything I'm about to say about this machine is based upon what they sent me for review. I cannot guarantee that this is exactly what you will receive if you sponsor this project. And please keep in mind that a Kickstarter campaign is not a guarantee of a product, but only a reward for backing them and sponsoring them. That being said, obviously, this is a physical product. It works. It worked for me, and I'm going to give you my thoughts on what they sent me. So I think I've made it pretty clear that I was a big fan of the original toy DIY that eCube Maker sent me. That machine worked really, really well, and this is a much bigger version of that machine, all the way down to the electronics being almost identical, or possibly even being identical. That includes the firmware, the main board, the drivers, and everything. When I did my first review, one of the things I said was, I love this machine if it were only bigger, and that's what they've given me here. But they haven't done so with any upgrades. They haven't really taken it to the next level, at least in terms of the capabilities of the machine. It's just the same machine, but bigger. What I would have liked to have seen, a new main board, 32-bit processing, new silent stepper drivers that they could switch in and out of the speed of the silent step mode, so that it could have had strength for CNC, and but it would have just been, I think, an overall better machine if they would have taken a little bit of time to do that. They should have also taken some time to revamp their software a little bit. Again, same software that came with this machine, not even newer versions of it really, just new profiles to support the bigger bed size. That's really the two areas I think that this machine is really weak. So what are the strengths of this machine? Number one, the platform itself is terrific. It's Again, I said so before, it's built like a tank. It's an excellent construction. It's got 2 different build plates. And again, I didn't go into all of that here because I wanted to be relatively quick, as quick as I can be, going over everything. But it's got 2 different build plates. It's got the thick metal build plate for CNC. It's got a glass build plate for printing. And I was just really overall happy with the time expense that they put into the actual construction, the gauge of all of the steel. It's really well done. The other thing is, it does all 3 of the things that it sets out to do. It just does them very average. This is definitely, I would say, a beginner machine because it doesn't have any of the power features that someone that knows really what they were doing would want to be able to do from the firmware. You can't do much on the display. The display is pretty much step, 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 print, CNC, laser. But it does those basic functions reasonably well. It is a printer, it does CNC, it does laser, and it does all 3 of them without hassle, just without a lot of bells and whistles. I think the real strength for anyone looking for a machine like this is someone that wants to get started with all 3 of these, that maybe is interested in the fabrication business or would like to see which one of these 3 technologies that they think is going to be more useful. This is a good platform for that because, again, it does all 3 fairly well, and it's easy to get started. Also, someone may be interested in this machine if they don't have a whole lot of space because, again, you have all 3 machines in one space. Now, it's a pretty big footprint, as you can see here. It's about as big as my Ender 5 Plus, both in size and all 3 dimensions, to be honest. I think if you don't have a whole lot of space, this is going to be a good machine choice for you. Now, in their videos that are on their Kickstarter, they show this in someone's living area. This is not a machine that needs to be in a living area. You've got lasers going, you've got CNC debris being kicked up. The only thing you'd really want in the living area potentially is that PLA printing, because that's pretty harmless as long as you're printing with good PLA. And just keep that in mind. This is a workshop machine. It needs to be somewhere that people are not going to be passing through. Again, you definitely wouldn't want that with the laser going. You really wouldn't want that with the CNC going. Number one, it's going to be super loud, and it is going to potentially just get debris everywhere. So I don't think you'd want to do that. So looking at the Kickstarter, the pricing on this machine is going to be anywhere from about $349, if that's still available, for a single tool head, all the way up to about $598 US, again, if that's still available, for all 4 tool heads. They do give you some options there as to which tool heads you want to buy, whether you want just this as a printer or whether you want to do the CNC and lasering. I think that that's a good price. I think you're getting more than that in the steel metal like construction here. That I think is what you're paying for, as well obviously as the technology that has gone into developing and manufacturing these tool heads. I think it's a decent price for what you're getting. I wouldn't be surprised to see a machine that's this big that does all of these multi-purpose things to be probably about the $800 to $900 range when it's at full retail price. So that Kickstarter price is a good price. So if any of those use cases I mentioned before appeal to you, if you've thought of your own use cases for this machine and this looks like something that you want to own, please go check out their Kickstarter. I just wanted to say that eCube Maker sent me over this unit for review purposes. No additional money or anything else exchanged hands. They just sent me the machine so I could tell you about it, and that's what I've done here. So again, go check them out, link in the description. So usual channel stuff, I'm going to go through this quickly here. First of all, I want to very quickly say thank you to my Patreon supporters who are scrolling up here. Those are the people that keep this channel running month after month. They support the work I do here. So thank you, thank you, thank you to those people. And thank you to everyone else for watching, sharing, commenting, liking, all of that usual YouTube stuff. Again, if you're not subscribed, which most of you aren't according to the statistics, please hit the subscribe button where you can find more content like this, as well as a bunch of mods and a bunch of projects that are coming up, because that's what I do right here on this channel. So that's it for me today. Thank you for watching. I'm Chris, and this has been Kersey Fabrications.